16th, 1:32, and we're calling this meeting of the CRTPA to order. Mr. Slay, start with roll call.
Ma'am, Ms. Mitchell, if you would, please.
Commissioner Barfield,
I'm right here.
Commissioner Allen, Commissioner Merritt,
Present.
Commissioner Villabisier, Commissioner Dozier,
Aye.
Commissioner Maddox, Commissioner Minor,
Present.
Commissioner Matlow,
Here.
Commissioner Richardson,
Here.
Commissioner Williams Cox.
And we have a quorum?
We do. Ms.
We do.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we're
Is there any agenda modifications?
No, sir.
Okay. Moving on to 3, citizens' comment. 1 speaker form.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Ford, what is it? Sandy Forbes, come to the microphone over here. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Ford comes to the mic. At this, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry. Just as you were walking up, I was going to make a comment. I have heard from some citizens about this meeting and our blueprint meeting when we're sitting in the large room. It's a little echoey, that they can't really hear us as well. And I'm going to try to do my best to lean into the mic, but you all may have heard the same. I just wanted to mention it here. It'd be good for us to think about that since the room's so large.
Noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Forbes, state your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
I can't hear.
Okay, I'm sorry. My name is Sandy A. Forbes, and my address is 400 Capitol Circle Southeast, 243. I'm here today to speak on the commuter transit system that Star Metro is currently in the early stages of. I had spoke to them in another meeting at their facility and spoke to them about the same design that I had designed about 6 years ago. Okay, this commuter system, it will connect the Florida Panhandle to the rest of South Florida by rail line, and it would also connect the southern counties of Georgia by using the old rail lines they have there that runs through Seminole County, Decatur County, Mitchell, Grady, Thomas, Colquitt, Tifton, Berrien, Cook, Lowndes, Linear, Klitsch, Echoes, I can't pronounce that one, but it's southern Georgia, and Charlton and Camden. This rail line is currently owned by, I believe, CSX, and I know that Star Metro has chosen a spot, the old CSX train station over there off of FAMU Way, which 6 years ago I had looked at and I said, man, this will make, a great subway for the people around here. The line would also run from Leon County down through Wakulla, Franklin, Jefferson, Liberty, Bay County, Walton, Okaloosa, Escambia, and head north into Georgia, reconnecting over in Jacksonville, just north of Nassau County, running back across to Baker, Hamilton, Madison, Jefferson, and back to Leon, which there will be a switch connection there leaving from Jefferson heading southward on the East Panhandle, on the east coast of Florida, all the way down to Charlotte. The southern route on the east coast will head all the way down to Martin, which is where you have the Sunrail and everything connects up down there. And the average fare one way would be a minimum of maybe $6 to $7 one-way trip, and no matter which direction you're going. And a round trip would be roughly around $12 to maybe $13 round trip. On
Mr.
an
Forbes,
average,
you're at 3 minutes, Mr. Forbes. You're at 3 minutes. It may be helpful to have a longer conversation at another point, and we'll make sure staff gets in touch
Yes,
with
sir.
you to address those issues. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Next on the agenda is our consent agenda. Have any items been pulled for?
Move consent.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Merritt to move consent, seconded by Commissioner Minor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to 6, roll call vote, agenda items. A, the fiscal year 2025 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Lex will give you a quick overview of this amendment.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to present this to you, and congratulations to the City of Tallahassee and Star Metro for the award of $400,000 for the Helping Obtain Prosperity for Everyone Hope Program Grant Award. This is being amended into the TIP to ensure consistency for the FTA so that they can process the grant award. And as you can see by the tip page, this is being done in conjunction with the South City Transit Center so that they will complete the study, route and optimization study, and also look at the financial implications, the realignment of bus routes, and recommend any service changes to increase mobility options for citizens on the south side. And they're hoping to align this with the opening of the South City Transit Center. I'm requesting roll call vote approval for the resolution number 2021-0306A.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion on the table by Commissioner Merritt, seconded by Commissioner Vivicier. Any discussion on this item before roll call vote? Commissioner Minor?
Just want to congratulate Star Metro and the City of Tallahassee. This is a great grant.
I didn't understand that.
Congratulations.
He said City of Tallahassee is really awesome, and Star Metro's great. Okay, let's take the roll call vote.
Commissioner Barfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Allen, Commissioner Merritt,
Aye.
Commissioner Villabisier,
Yeah.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yay.
Commissioner Minor,
Aye.
Commissioner Matlow,
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson.
Yes.
Unanimously passes.
Thank you.
Perfect. Moving on to 7, CRTPA action. We're at A, Star Metro Comprehensive Operational Analysis and Transportation Development Plan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, early last year, the board had a brief discussion regarding regional transit, and as part of that, we actually had these items on the schedule for your retreat in January. But first, we're going to hear from Star Metro giving us an update on their COA as well as their transit development plan, and then followed up by a presentation from Pat Maurer from the ARPC regarding the commuter services program. So with that, I'll turn over to Andrea Rosser. And Andrea, go ahead.
Thank you, Greg. So Star Metro hired Nelson Nygaard to perform our comprehensive operational analysis and our major update to our transit development plan. And Bethany Whitaker is on virtually and is going to give you a presentation of where we are to date. The project actually kicked off February 17th, so we've done a good bit between then and now. So I'll let Bethany take over.
Thanks, Andrea. So I'm going to share my screen, which I think you can see now, and get started. So thank you very much. So my name's Bethany Whitaker. I work for a consulting firm called Nelson Nygaard. We work on transit planning issues nationally, and we've been working, as Andrea mentioned, with Star Metro for a couple of months now. And what I'm going to do today is talk sort of generally about the importance of transit, a little bit about Star Metro, talk about what the transit development plan and the comprehensive operation analysis are, and then just give you a little bit of background about how we're going to approach the projects. So I think we can just starting off with why do we care about transit? I think everybody kind of generally knows that transit is an important part of cities and communities and even rural areas in terms of making sure people have options for getting around. But I love working with public transportation in part because it does touch so many things and so many parts of what we're trying to accomplish. So when we talk about all these benefits, some of the things that we do talk about is quality of life, right? Like everybody's really interested about growing and developing, but maintaining that quality of life. And when we talk to communities about what that means, a lot of the times it means having neighborhoods and streets where there's a lot of pedestrians or maybe even cyclists, and being less oriented around the automobile. So a lot of times what connects these neighborhoods and communities and doesn't turn them into these auto-centric arterials is access to transit, because it allows people to go further in greater numbers. Also, we know that transit can have a big role in stimulating economic development. We've had a lot of examples in the past several years about using transit and investing transit services in particular corridors to stimulate economic development. There's, and you can really direct and shape where you want it to go, sorry. And then also another economic argument for investing in transit is really about retaining your young talent. We know that older generations, they really looked at automobiles and that meant freedom to them. But when people are, the younger generation is a little bit more interested in having alternatives and options. They like using Uber and Lyft, they like riding transit, they might want to have a car, they might want to be on a scooter, but transit is definitely a part of that. So communities like Tallahassee that have a lot of universities and young people and they fall in love with Tallahassee, they want to stay, having transit can help keep them there. There are also some economic issues associated with transit in terms of access to opportunities, right? And we know that owning a car is very expensive and that people who have lower incomes or living closer to poverty levels need to have access to transportation in order to get to work, to get to school, and to access services. So in Tallahassee, about a third of the population is at or near the poverty level. This map shows the darker colors where some of those populations are concentrated. Another indicator of a need for transit are households that don't have a vehicle at that household. And again, this map shows the concentrations of those populations. And so if you don't have access to a car or you're lower income, having transit can really be a lifeline and access to opportunities, both economic and otherwise. And then finally, we know that transit and mobility in general and having more options other than driving can have a lot of public health impacts, especially in terms of keeping people active and reducing obesity rates. So those are just some of the reasons why transit is important and how it can benefit your community. I also just want to spend a minute or two talking about Star Metro. I think most of you probably know a lot of this information. Star Metro operates around 30 routes. About half of those are called weekday routes. That means they operate Monday through Friday, about 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. There are a handful of routes that operate at night and on Sunday, and then 8 that serve the Florida State University campus specifically. So this is their regular service. Some of these services have been changed slightly during the COVID pandemic as people are staying home more and working at different ways or working at home. Star Metro also operates what they call flex services and demand response services. These are transit services where you call in advance and schedule a ride. And there are 2 types. There are a handful of these types of services. Some are required by the federal government for people with disabilities. And then other services that are really designed to serve areas where we know that there are people who need the service, but the land uses make it difficult to serve with a fixed route. With a big bus. So we put a small bus in there instead. We ask people to call, and you can see these pink areas. That's where some of the dial-a-ride services are. So Star Metro's been doing pretty well over the past couple of years. Before the pandemic, one of the things that was happening nationally was that transit services were losing riders. We're seeing that the trend overall for Star Metro, that was not the case in 2018, 2019. Ridership overall was up. It was down a little bit on the weekdays, but stronger on Saturdays and Sundays, and about the same with the campus. So of course, prior to the pandemic, we were looking at certain things about transit, in particular, like its competitiveness, related to some of the new modes and the new ways that people can travel, like Uber and Lyft, but also scooters and electric bikes and things like that. Now with coming in and out of the pandemic, we're going to be looking for some different trends and some different opportunities to strengthen and improve service. And then just a couple of more points. One is that Star Metro in 2019 spent just under $21 million to operate the service, and another 11.5 or so on capital projects. In terms of the operating money, about 3/4 of that went to support the fixed route or the big bus services, and then another quarter went to those demand response services. And then the money, just as a reminder, it comes from primarily about 40% from the City of Tallahassee, around 20% from the federal government, 20% from the state of Florida, and then just under 20% through a contract with Florida State University. So it's a good partnership across a handful of agencies and organizations, a big partner with the City of Tallahassee to keep the service operating and running. So in terms of what the Transit Development Plan and the Comprehensive Operations Analysis do, they're two separate studies, and they do things, but they're very closely related, and so the fact that we're doing them together is creating some efficiencies for us. The Transit Development Plan is required by the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Transit. Star Metro has to do one of these every 5 years. The idea is to look at the system overall and make sure that we set some goals and some long-term strategies and objectives looking forward. Where do we want to make investments? How do we want the system to grow? And what do we expect to happen over time? This compares with the comprehensive operational analysis, which is a little bit more a lot more focused on what's happening right now. So we're going to look at every bus stop, every trip, every day of the week, see who's using the service, how well it's being used. Do we need to make services longer or shorter? Do we need to change the hours of operation? Do they fit together as a nice piece of the puzzle that makes it easy for people to get to go where they want to go? We have a little bit more time for this project, and we'll be working until the end of the year on this one. So you'll hear from us, and we'll be around a little bit longer. Star Metro, of course, is doing some other things. They're installing or updating their automatic passenger counters. These are the pieces of equipment that counts every time. It records the location, time of day, every time somebody gets on or off the bus. So super useful for understanding how the system works. Also, Star Metro is installing new fare box, improving the smartphone apps, and making some adjustments associated with COVID. But it is an exciting time for the agency in terms of some investments and some improvements and opportunities for the next couple of years. We have also been doing a fair amount of community engagement. Maybe some of you attended the virtual community meeting that we held in the middle of February. We had somewhere between around 75 people from the community participated in that, so it was pretty good turnout. We had 2 meetings. And we have a live survey. We're calling it a Design Your Own Transit System tool, and it's still available on the starmetrothinktransit.com on the webpage. You can go there. It's an interactive survey where we give you a budget, and you can tell us how you would like, if you were designing your own transit system, this is how you would invest in transit services. So I encourage you to go in and check it out, maybe fill it out. And if you have any constituents or groups that you can share it with, we would appreciate that as well. We're going to keep that survey up until late March and early April or so. We want to get to around 500 or so responses. So we've also been doing a lot of interviews with stakeholders around the community, and we've held about 15 or so, many of departments within the City of Tallahassee, but also some of the major partners like Florida State University, Tallahassee Community College, FDOT, CRTPA as well. So we've been collecting feedback and asking people what they think the strengths of the system are, what the weaknesses are, where they want to see areas of improvement. So we're taking all that feedback in as we do some of the technical work. And then just briefly, what I wanted to do is just kind of go through some of the thinking and some of the ways that we're going to be analyzing the Star Metro system, just to give you some ideas about how we do transit planning. I think a lot of times people, members of the public or elected officials, they can be frustrated with the way that the transit system works, but there's some logic and some process that we like to do when we're doing these kind of studies. The first thing is to make sure that we are tying land use and transit services. So I think this is something that most people sort of know intuitively. If there are areas where there's a lot of people or a lot of jobs, we can have very fast or we can have very frequent transit service. So if you think about downtown New York City, with all the high rises and all the jobs and all the people, well, then you can have a bus that comes every 3 minutes. If you're talking about a suburban neighborhood, you're not going to have that level of service. You can still have transit service, but we need to design it so that it matches the need and the amount of people that are there and the type of people that are there. So we at Nelson-Nygaard, we go through a really vigorous process of looking at the densities, the type of people that live in those communities, and then saying, okay, this is what we know about this, the land uses and the demographics. Here's a type of transit service that we think would work. We also have a series of design principles that we like to think about constantly when we're evaluating routes, and these are really focused on making sure that the service is easy to use and easy to understand. And again, I think this sort of speaks to this, things can get really complicated, but ultimately, if we want somebody to be able to use the system, they need to be able to understand it, it needs to be simple, and it needs to be reliable. And a lot of times that simplicity also makes it easier to operate and keep things on time. So we'll be looking at every route and saying, you know, does it go out and back on the same street? Is it easy to understand? Does it leave at, 1 o'clock, 1:15, 1:30 instead of like 1:27 and 1:48? Like things that are repeating, easy to understand. So we will be looking at the service and applying these principles and making sure that things are aligned as effectively as possible. And then I'm just going to kind of close out with a little bit of a story about what happens to bus services over time and why the COA process can be really useful. And because Nelson Nygaard does this a lot, and we've seen this sort of play out in a whole bunch of places, we have this little story that we like to tell, that in the beginning there was a bus service that was well-designed. It took people from point A to point B, and it was simple, easy to use, operated pretty simply. And then, 6 months goes by and there's a couple of calls that come into the transit agency asking to add a few stops. And so the transit agency wanted to be responsive to those constituents. And so they say, okay, we're going to add some stops. So it slows the bus service down, but it still stays on the same path. And then 6 months later go by, and then there's 2 more apartment complexes that come in near the route, but not on the route. So that, again, the transit agency decides to be really responsive, and it makes a couple of detours to go and serve those 2 apartment complexes at their front door. So again, trying to be responsive, but the bus service ends up being less direct, slower, less reliable, and harder for the people that are just trying to get from point A to point B. And then, the next thing that happens is that there's a new retail establishment that's a couple of blocks away, so they extend the route out. And then so you can see over time that a transit route kind of starts off being very simple and elegant and effective, and then gets pulled in a lot of different direction, and as a result is slower, it's less reliable, it's less useful for the rider, harder for the transit agency to operate, and over time you may get a few more riders, but you end up costing the system a lot more. And so I just told this story just to give you guys a sense of like some of the things that we'll be looking at and the way that we're going to be examining the service and say, okay, maybe it makes sense to stop at to serve one of these stops, but sometimes, the apartment building closes or it serves a new type of person and these people don't ride transit as much, and we can cut this leg out. And we'll just go through that. We have a scalpel in our hand. We're looking to make things more efficient, more effective, easier to operate, easier to understand, and better for the community overall. And with that, that's most of what I wanted to share with you all, but if you have any questions or you want to talk about the services or the study, please let me know. Great, thank you for the presentation. Commissioner Minor, who comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bethany, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. I used to work at the city many years ago, and I saw firsthand the work that Star Metro does, and really wanted to commend everything that you all do. It's not easy work, but you guys are able to provide an essential service to folks that live in this area. My question for you is, how would we go about asking Star Metro, the City of Tallahassee, to explore needs analysis for an extension of an existing route?
So we have a bunch of ways that we're going to be doing that. One is what we call a market analysis, which, as I mentioned, we look at the land uses and the demographics. So we'll look at things like people who older adults, people with disabilities, people with low incomes, racial minorities, households without a vehicle. And if we see a concentration of those populations, we would expect to also see transit service. The second thing we can do is when we do the comprehensive operations analysis, sometimes we see trips, like the first trip of the day will have a lot of riders. If we see that, sometimes that means that we're not starting early enough because we have a big jump at that first trip. Sometimes and we'll hold public meetings and have surveys and go out and talk to people and listen to them. And then we'll also look at other plans and studies that the City of Tallahassee is doing. So we have a lot of sources of information. We'll pull that together and make recommendations for how the services can be changed.
I know in of course, the west side, south side, you've got really good coverage of routes, and that's where a great degree of the need is, right? You've got folks that are
Yep.
living below poverty, high percentages of people living below poverty in those areas, as well as folks, families without vehicles. So I see definitely where that coverage is needed and where you're providing it. I've been speaking with some folks up around the Tower Road, Old Bainbridge, and Capitol Circle Northwest area. And for a while now, they've been talking with me about requesting an extension of the Big Bend route, Route B, extending from North Monroe up to that Tower Road, Old Bainbridge, Capitol Circle Northwest area. A lot of population there. There is some poverty there that's larger than other areas relative to that northern part of the city. And I know they're currently being served by Flex Service, by Dial-A-Ride, but is there currently an effort right now to take a look at what type of needs analysis might be needed in that area and the cost-benefit analysis of that? Because from folks I've been speaking with in that area, there seems to be a pretty good need that could be addressed with an extension of the Route B up to that interchange.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we'll be doing as part of this project, is looking at the need, assessing it, seeing how we can best serve it, and is it with maybe more flex service, or is it an extension of an existing route? If we extend an existing route, where do we want to connect into? So we will be looking exactly at those things.
Okay, so if I wanted to kind of keep tabs on that, keep tabs on that part of the study that you're doing with the comprehensive operational analysis, could I reach out to you or someone else at Star Metro to check in?
Yep, absolutely. You can reach me, and I think I do actually have my telephone number and email right here.
Right.
Of course, you can also contact Star Metro, and then we do also have a web page that you can go in and take a look at that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help.
Of course.
Thank you, Commissioner. Going to Commissioner Merritt.
I noticed your revenue sources didn't include the fees. Where does that fit in?
That is a good question. Hold on one second. Let me just, so I think, bring that back up. So the fees are relatively small relative to some of these, most of these sources, and it would come under the City of Tallahassee.
Okay.
Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I realize that we provide services right now where the need is in terms of the kinds of demographics that you talked about. But one of the things that we're moving towards is getting people out of cars. In all the years that I've lived in Tallahassee, Tallahasseans love their cars. And we want to park right in front of the store that we're going into, and there'll be a parking space, and we walk in and walk back out. But I think the move now is towards getting people out of cars and using transit more. And it's not based on need or racial demographic or socioeconomic status, but trying to cut down on the number of cars that are populating our roads and highways, but roads in particular here in the city. What will Star Metro do in that respect to get more of even the affluent? I know we had a route, for instance, at one time that served Southwood, and it was so poorly used that we had to eliminate that route because we couldn't afford to continue it. Are there any plans for making the system more attractive to folk in those areas that are highly populated? You know, we've got Canopy that's going to be coming on, or has come online. Of course, Welaunee will be coming online in maybe the next 10 or 15 years. Is Star Metro looking at being more attractive to people in those areas to encourage them to use transit as opposed to jumping in their cars and getting on the road each day?
So I think that is a really good question, and it is also a big part of what we're going to be talking about. So
Okay.
we have a limited amount of resources, right? And we as a community, City of Tallahassee, Star Metro, you can spend and invest them in different ways. And you establish your values and your goals for the system, and then you invest your resources according to achieve those goals. And most transit systems do want a combination of what sometimes we call choice riders, or people that are more affluent and may have a car in their driveway, and encourage them to use transit to buy into the system. Their tax dollars, of course, are also paying for the service, as well as serving people with lower incomes in certain parts of the community. And create a transportation system and network that's not just dependent on the automobile. I think that is the trend that we're moving towards kind of nationally. And we have to talk about that and understand the trade-offs. And if we choose to create some more services to certain parts of the community, at what cost, and do we think we'll get enough riders to make it worthwhile? Are we providing access to an important job market or some key services like a hospital or a community college? And so we will be looking at those things, understanding the trade-offs, and then making decisions about how to prioritize investments.
Okay.
And also always working towards this, a transportation network that's not just dependent on the car, but also considers other ways to move people around.
Okay. Now,
Does that help?
Will you all be surveying individuals in those areas to find out what might attract them to the system?
Yes. Yep. And the survey that we have right now, this Design Your Own Transit survey that I mentioned, it does give people, it asks people how we could make transit more attractive to them.
Okay.
And it's, as I mentioned, it's still live. Most of the people that have filled this out are not typical riders. I think it's like 70. We have some demographic data on them, understanding their age, but you can go and take this transit service, or encourage people that to take the survey and let us know what you're looking for and what kinds of services are going to be attractive to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Dozier?
Thank you very much. And good presentation. I'm really looking forward to seeing the reports when they come out. Bethany, I just had a few questions, and I guess picking up on making it more attractive, but also that Southwood route and others. I'm kind of stuck in the mindset of how the bus system was in the 80s and the 90s, where we were just spokes on a wheel. Everyone had to come into downtown, and then you had to transfer, and that may have even extended into the 2000s. And I want to echo the compliments to Star Metro for all the work you've done in recent years to really break up the system and make it more efficient. But do we have transfer stations? I know we're thinking about like a larger transfer station down on Orange Avenue and other things, but is there ability now to jump off one route and get on another so you don't have to come into the downtown?
Yes, and this map that's up on the screen now, I'm assuming you guys can see it. You can see some of these, what we call crosstown routes, so that if you're traveling from the northwest here and you want to go to the southwest, you don't have to go into downtown, that you can actually take a route that just goes directly, it travels directly north-south, as well as some of these east-west routes that don't require you to go downtown. And I know that was a deliberate effort on the part of Star Metro to make sure, move away from that system where everybody comes into downtown and then transfers out. It could like double the length of your trip. So yes, we now have some of these crosstown routes, and we'll look at how productive those services are and how effective they are in facilitating that network that you're talking about.
Okay, so I thought that was the case, and when you showed your map of how a bus route might evolve with additional stops and other things, we're really taking it from the new system we've had in recent years, which went through a major overhaul and added a lot of benches, other things like that. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I'm going to get Mr. Chair into a few just really specific questions. I'll try to move through it quickly. So ride share, I'm wondering if that is an option that works in other communities, if we can't extend bus routes to our neighboring counties, if people actually use a rideshare program. I don't know if that is really necessary in our community because we don't have the traffic congestion that other places do. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I saw the Director Slay waving at me there.
I was just going to mention that's actually part of the part 2 of the presentation.
It's part 2 of the presentation. Well, then I will hold on to that for a second. I knew we were getting to that. And we can have bikes and other alternative modes of transportation on the buses. Is that correct? So we're kind of
That's
assisting. Okay. So 2 questions quickly about funding. The state gas tax, I'm just wondering if that is a portion of the state gas tax that is dedicated to transit, or if it's part of the local share of the local option, the 1 penny that we added in several years ago. I'm just trying to understand that piece a little bit.
I'm not 100% sure. I think, I don't know, Andrea, if you can answer that question, but I'm pretty sure this is a portion of the gas tax gets carved out for transit.
For transit, okay.
It is that local share.
It is the local share entry, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for that. That was pretty significant. We had left a penny on the table, or 5 cents rather. We had left 5 cents on the table for Leon County. We brought that in, and there's a cost share with the City of Tallahassee, or revenue sharing. Am I saying that correctly? Sort of?
Sort of.
Do you mind illuminating that a little bit?
Do you want to answer the
just talk
question,
about the
Andrea?
gas
Yeah, the
tax in
revenue
general.
part is
Yeah,
kind of confusing to me, but I know that is a transfer from the county.
from the county
Gas
to the
tax.
city, okay.
Yes.
Well, but I think, though, to clarify a little bit, if I'm understanding your question, you're referring to the state gas tax revenues
Yes.
there? That's actually what's called the DOT block grant,
That's what I was,
and that's the 15% off the top, so to speak, that the state sets aside for those block grant funds. And I just want to make sure everybody's clear, and Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of, I think you're also referred to the local option sales tax, none of that goes to operating.
I'm sorry, Greg, I misspoke there. It was a local option for gas tax. Locally, we can up our gas tax, and Leon County had not maximized that revenue, and this was, sorry, Commissioner Maddox, 6 years ago, maybe? Looking to you, since you might have been the only one on the county at that time. About 6 years ago. So once we exercised the option to get that additional 5 pennies, we have a revenue share with the city. So it was additional
on the
gas
tax
tax
itself.
funding going to the city.
Correct.
So I just wondered if that was what was indicated there, or if it was a block grant.
I think that might be, the only portion of that, again, I believe that's going to Star Metro is that $120,000 a year that's shown at the chart up there.
It probably would show up as city revenue because it is their money once it comes out of the gas tax. So I'll leave that alone. I just trying to suss out, where these different revenue streams are coming from. And that leads me to Leon County. And yes, we are a very small sliver of that pie. So I would just say, for our purposes here, to my memory, and I've thought about this since looking at the presentation, I don't think there's ever been a discussion about county being involved with Star Metro, except when, at least for my part, I asked a question about the East Side Branch Library when we moved it from Appalachia Parkway to Pedrick Road. That was a public facility that no longer has a bus route servicing that library. I'm not sure that could happen with all branch libraries out in Fort Braden, Woodville areas, but I do have a particular concern about public facilities and making sure, even if they're in the county, that we have bus access to those public facilities. So that was the only time that I had heard the city kind of say, well, county can pay for this one route if we want that. But I think understanding your operational study and the revenue sharing and everything is going to give us an idea if there's more options on the table going forward. So that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments on this item? All right, we're moving on to 7B, the right-on presentation.
I'd like to introduce Pat Maurer from the Appalachia Regional Planning Council. Pat, can you hear me okay?
I can, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, the Ride on Commuter Services program is sponsored by the Florida Department of Transportation to provide communities and business leaders and individuals with transportation options, just as we were discussing, alternatives to driving in the car alone. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the programs that we offer. The programs that we offer include the Ride on Commuter Services program, which is sponsored by the Florida Department of Transportation to provide communities and business leaders with transportation options, just as we were discussing, alternatives to driving in the car alone. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about the programs that we offer. Especially, certainly in Tallahassee, if you haven't lived in a bigger city, you can feel like traffic is bad here. Those of you who have driven in Atlanta or Los Angeles, you understand Tallahassee traffic is pretty manageable. But even so, we want to have that quality of place that makes people feel welcome and relaxed. As Bethany mentioned, stopping that brain drain, the talent drift that comes from not having that sense of place. So, and particularly in our rural communities, which are beautiful and affordable places to live, but transportation can be even more challenging for those folks. It can have recruiting challenges for businesses, high cost of turnover, you have to replace the folks that you lose. For job seekers, finding that affordable housing means you may have to be some distance from where transit service is offered. So that can be a challenge. And of course, for business leaders, you may have a great spot out in one of the rural counties to put your new facility, but if the majority of your labor force is going to be coming from, say, Leon County, transportation can be a challenge. So fortunately, that's why we're here. We partner with leaders in business and government. We serve everyone who commutes for either work or education for university and college age students. We do serve adults exclusively, but all of our programs are available to the public free of charge. We can help communities increase mobility and reduce traffic and parking demand. We also address some public health and safety issues. For example, if you want to promote bicycle commuting, we do some safe bicycle riding classes for adults, which are always fun. And we partner with community organizations like Star Metro, Big Bend Transit, with Career Source, with FAMU, FSU, and TCC, and even with Sustainable Tallahassee to get some of those vehicle miles traveled. We talk about VMT reduction all the time, and I know you all are probably more familiar with all these acronyms than most, but I try and stay away from them when I'm presenting because VMT doesn't mean a lot to folks outside of transportation.
Hey, Pat, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you supposed to be showing your presentation? Because we're not seeing it on this end.
Are you not seeing my slides?
No, ma'am.
Well,
Sorry.
they're beautiful, so let me figure out how to do that here. Let me minimize that. Oh, there we go. Share PowerPoint. All right.
There we go. Okay.
So we're talking about some of the challenges. And this will be much more interesting for you now that you have something to look at besides me. So this is our service area that we work in partnership with Emerald Coast Regional Council. And primarily, I do Jackson, Calhoun Gulf, and East. And my counterparts over in Pensacola handle the counties west. But we do work together. So if there's an employer who is recruiting from one county for a location in another, there's really no boundaries. It's all one program. So as I mentioned, we can help communities with public health and safety. Certainly in Florida, we have some major high-risk populations with obesity, diabetes, heart disease. So we work with Department of Health from time to time as well to do some of the Step Up Florida campaigns, Earth Day. We've done a celebration of bicycles in the park a few years ago, and that's all really fun. We work with the Office of Economic Vitality, with Career Source, and with the Society for Human Resource Management too at times. So we take 3 tacks for this. We do the local government approach, which is the Transportation Demand Management Consulting. And again, even if you are a municipality, a state agency, whatever, our services are free. So it's fully funded by a grant from DOT. We do employer-based outreach as well. And then we have individual commuter assistance programs online, and we have a nifty new app. So transportation demand management has lots of things under that umbrella. As I mentioned, some of the public safety concerns, sustainability, economic growth, and also if maybe Star Metro wants us to work with them on determining the feasibility for a new transit route, we can also assist with that. For the employers, we visit their site, talk with administration, find out what some of their challenges are. Many times parking around a business is limited. And so getting employees to either park a long way off and walk into work to leave room for your customers, or, certainly building parking is expensive, incredibly expensive, and maintaining it and all of that. So what we do is go in and assess the site with the employer and help them determine what specific strategies would help them best address the issues that they're having. There are tax benefits, there are national recognition programs that we can certainly clue them into. And then we provide our transportation services in-house at no charge to the employer. So it's like an extra perk that they can offer to their employees without any cost to the business. We also have found through research that businesses that engage their employees, that have high employee satisfaction, are more successful. For one thing, they have less of that expensive turnover, so that helps a lot. Why should the employees care? Well, most of us spend $3,000 at a minimum, and some people over $6,000 a year on transportation. So when you use these options like ride sharing with a carpool or van pool, hop on the bus, use that as your email time, because you shouldn't have your phone when you're driving, right? And of course, biking or walking is also part of promoting health, as well as meeting our environmental responsibilities. So commuter assistance is done with free confidential ride matching. We have an app that you can use, or it's available online, and we've got Apple and Android, so we can, whatever device you use, we can help you. And then it's available online as well, and people can just call our 800 number also, and we'll take down their information over the phone and send them an email with their potential matches. Now, the system uses a very specific search pattern so that when we suggest that someone might be a good carpool partner for you, they live within a mile of you, and they work within a mile of you, and they have a schedule that matches yours. Also, there's no obligation when you put your information into the system, and because you're communicating with others through our platform, even your email address is not seen by anyone. So unless you type in your email address to show to someone or to share with them, you're not going to have any privacy concerns with this. You decide who, if anyone, you want to call or reach out to, and then arrange between yourselves whether you're going to share gas expenses or take turns driving. Let's see. So you can set up a profile with your normal, regular daily commute, or you can use this for the occasional trip, especially for students. It's great for them to have a place where they can connect with other people who are maybe going home for holidays from the universities and things like that. This program can also be used for that. So it's very easy to go online. It takes about 2 minutes to set up a profile, and you decide who to call, as I mentioned, and then just start saving money. We also offer an emergency ride home program. This is probably the most important thing that I can tell people about in order to facilitate them making a mode shift. And that is, when you participate in a green mode, like carpool, van pool, bus, bike, walk, 3 days a week, you log it on a little calendar in the app, you put your finger or your stylus on the little bus cartoon and drag it over onto that day for the calendar, and it'll ask you, did you take the bus home as well? Yes, so you put another little bus over there. And it tracks those trips on the calendar. Then if you have an emergency, maybe you got held up with some unexpected overtime, you've missed the last bus that goes to your neighborhood for the day. You go back into your calendar and click the little emergency button, and it will check your calendar, verify that you're authorized, and it will give you a code that you can call Yellow Cab and give them this code. They will pick you up, take you home. It doesn't matter if it's 5 miles, 105 miles. If you work here and live in Perry and the van went home without you, or you got sick and needed to go home early, same deal. As long as you've been tracking those green commutes, we've got you covered. So CRTPA asked me to check into our database and see what kind of participation we have in the existing program. Right now, we have just over 1,200 participants. Now, a lot of folks are working remotely right now because of COVID. So these are pre-COVID numbers. But I've been checking in with folks by phone as I can, and everybody's still on board. So other than a few move outs and people who have retired, these numbers are solid once we are able to move around freely again. Transit is our biggest slice, actually. So yay, Star Metro. And we also have lots of participation in carpools and van pools. I looked at the bike commuters, and you would be surprised how far some people are willing to bike to work. I say 5 miles or less is good, because then you're not sweaty when you get there and so on. But some folks really love doing that as their exercise, or they'll use the bike on bus to take Star Metro into the office and then have their bike ready for their ride home. And, you know, you're going to change clothes anyway when you get there, so no worries. As far as county of origin, right now we have participating 132 folks from Gadsden County, and that's largely due to the Gadsden Express. That's an amazing quick shuttle that goes back and forth, and Big Bend Transit just keeps expanding and it's growing. Even now with the pandemic, people still call every day and say, hey, when's the next bus for Quincy? So it's a very popular service. People really like that one. Jefferson County, we have 22 folks participating. I think several of those are a commuter van that goes to Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. So they are doing their bit. We have most of our folks in Leon County, of course, and then we have 84 from Wakulla County. And it's for Wakulla and some of the other counties, the issue is that it seems to be that folks live so far apart that by the time they've driven to the meetup place, they're over halfway to Tallahassee. So carpool's probably the best option there, rather than trying to create transit for Wakulla County. Although there may be some potential there as far as TCC goes, because I have spoken to a lot of TCC students who live in Crawfordville and do come into the campus here in Tallahassee for classes. So certainly we would be happy to coordinate with TCC specifically to do a survey of their students or something like that and see what the need is there. So we are partnering with local stakeholders. We meet with major employers. We exhibit at community events. In fact, we are going to be at the Lemoyne Chain of Parks Art Festival on April 17th and 18th. So we invite you to come by, see some of our cool incentive items. We'll give you a present to take home. Also, April is Earth Month. Let me move over to my activity slide. April is Earth Month and May is National Bike Month. So we're going to have some special activities going on there. We hope you'll all follow us on Facebook. We try and post informative and entertaining things, as well as links to our partners that are doing the transportation surveys and things like that. Let's see. Oh, and our annual Mobility Week is that statewide DOT sponsors throughout Florida takes place in the fall. So be sure and keep an eye out for that as well. Cycling Savvy is the Safe Bicycle Commuting Workshop that we normally sponsor. And CRTPA has just recently revitalized our community traffic safety team. And we're happy to be participating on that as well. And I think that is it for me. Here's my contact information, as well as my counterpart, Jason Arnold, over at Emerald Coast, for the folks who are over in the West. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Pat. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we're moving.
Go ahead.
I was waiting for your thing to go up.
Commissioner Dozier.
Actually, I was just going to say, shout out to Pat from our Regional Planning Council. So it's good to see you at a different meeting. Thank you for the presentation. And I had asked a question about rideshare.
Thank you for having me.
And you covered it all. So I just, that one question, thank you, Greg, for reminding me that Pat was up next. Very interesting information. So thanks, Pat.
Yeah, there is some confusion sometimes about the term rideshare. because Uber and Lyft promote themselves as rideshare, but what they really are is on-demand service. It's more like an amateur taxi, sorry, but that's what it is. Ride sharing is when I am traveling to this place anyway and willing to take along some folks in my vehicle. So we actually do see a reduction in those vehicle miles traveled.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the explanation and the nuance with it. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. Mr. Slay?
Just a couple of things. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this goes back to a brief conversation we had last year regarding regional transit. When we developed our UPWP this past year, we did put in some funding to look at a regional transit study. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that to see if you all were still interested. If you are, I think we would probably want to wait until the latter part, maybe towards the end of this year. The Star Metro stuff in particular is going to provide a lot of valuable information as a basis for a regional study. But I did want to have that conversation to see if you were still all interested in excuse me.
Absolutely. This is what I do all day. So yes.
Great. Any further comment? Commissioner Maddox?
I think I may have been the one that asked about the regional transit study piece. I mean, I'm interested in it, just to see what it would cost, what it would look like. It looks like we have
understand you, Commissioner.
I said, I think I was the one who brought up the regional transit piece study. I'd be interested in it. I think that with folks that live in outlying counties coming into Leon County and vice versa, I think it would be advantageous for us to look how we can become more regional with the approach. Maybe even looking at what a funding model would look like to make that happen. But I think I want to lean a little bit on the obvious reasons why Leon County and City of Tallahassee want to see something like this done, because it would, for Leon County's interest, it would help us see where we could expand our routes to accommodate those rural area folks, or those nodes like Fort Braden and Cheers and stuff like that. But does it go further out? Does it go to gas? Does it go to looking at what it looked like, what color, or Jefferson? But again, I would lean on those rural county folks to say if they would have any interest in seeing us, see how we can coordinate on more of a larger regional scale versus just being a Leon County, City of Tallahassee transit system, then some ride share in between. So I yield to those rural counties. But I like to see it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody from our rural counties want to weigh in? Okay. Commissioner Dozier?
Obviously, the ridership won't pay for it, so I can't see our county funding up millions of dollars to pay for a bus route. I mean, I'm just being realistic.
Commissioner Dozier?
Mr. Chair, I'm interested in exploring any options, but I think waiting until the comprehensive study with Star Metro is complete, as our Director Slade mentioned, that seems like the appropriate place to start, and particularly because we're working so closely with Ride On and with all the programs that Pat just talked about, that can probably feed in to that information if we want to take the next steps. The other thing I just want to acknowledge, I'm not sure if I remember correctly, Mr. Ford, you know, there long conversations about rail service or other types of mass transit service. That's a big funding issue. There's a lot of different complications, you know, with that, but I think a lot of people are talking about it. And if we see a shift, state or federal, in my gut feeling it might be federal first, on any kind of funding for other types of rail service, other types of community service, I think, you know, having that discussion at some point in the future and making sure we're all in to look for those funding sources could be beneficial to us, because our region doesn't have a lot of money compared to other regions, but it could be a really good thing for the future, for the long term. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And I think that's one of the areas where we can really be of use, is because our funding is already covered. Communities can just invite us in to whatever festivals, maybe a community action agency, or any sort of opportunity that we have to get the word out to the public. We can provide the services directly to them And so it doesn't have to be a funding source or a grant cycle or anything like that. The services are here. All we need is assistance getting the word out to the people who need them. Also, we can look at our data. We have used our database at times to look at feasibility for a transit route or something like that. If I look at the population of my database and I see there are 6 8-person van pools going from here to here, that's 48 people traveling the same way to work every morning. That tells me that there's some potential there. Folks who have already opted into our system have already decided they're willing to look at other things than driving alone. So you've got pre-qualified customers when you encourage folks to join with the ride-on system, and then you have those scatter maps and things that we can provide for you to look at and see, oh, well, there's a big cluster right here of folks who travel this specific way. We're happy to, we do not share or sell our data, but we're happy to analyze it to answer questions that you have.
Great, thank you, Pat. And Commissioner Maddox, let's not close the door on that conversation, but it seems after the Star Metro information.
Well, Bethany, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
And I should remember this, but can you remind me of the timeline for the TDP and the COA?
Sure. So the TDP, where we will have a draft plan, final plan, June-ish, needs to be submitted to Florida DOT by September, so it needs to go through all those processes. And then the COA will be later in the year, November, December.
Okay, so I think that would probably put us on a timeline of probably around that, September, October, November timeline to get something started. I would think by then we would have some good information to try to start to put something together.
Okay, great. So we'll know more by the fall. No other discussion. Let's move on to the MCORS update. I know I've been receiving emails. Do we have any public speakers registered to speak on this?
No, sir, we did not have anyone that spoke up. Greg, let me double check, make sure. Okay. Just real briefly, got the list that I had? Thank you. Since early in the session, we've had, I think, 5 bills in total filed. I'm going to start with Senate Bill 100. That's really the only one that's had any traction. It made it through the Senate Transportation Committee a couple of weeks ago and is actually scheduled for the Appropriations Committee, I believe, Thursday. This is probably the most robust bill. First and foremost, it actually repeals the MCORS legislation, and also related to us, it shifts the northern terminus of some set of facilities out of Jefferson County over to Madison County. It provides a fair amount of language about developing new facilities. In all honesty, some pieces of it are rather confusing, but in general, it makes, I think, an effort to provide improvements, but not under the timeline or anything of the MCORS program. There's 2 other bills, House Bill 6059 and 1590. Those are very simple bills, have been filed simply to remove Jefferson County as the northern terminus of the Suncoast Connector. They've been introduced but have not made any traction through any committees. And then as we mentioned last month, House Bill 763 and Senate Bill 1030 are parts of other bills, but in essence, both of those repeal the MCORS statutes in its entirety. The only one that appears to have any traction, as I mentioned, is Senate Bill 100, but at this point, there is no House companion. Last month, you all directed me to draft a letter to the MPOAC stating basically our position that we didn't want anything to impact our current work program. I drafted the letter but held off sending it based on what any feedback or any decision you all made today. So with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Slay. Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greg, on SB 100, it looks like, I might be reading this wrong, but it looks like the 2 bullets you've got here contradict each other. You've got under SB 100, repeals MCORS in its entirety, and then the next line talks about shifting the northern terminus.
It actually repeals the statute that established MCORS, but there is language in the statute that describes a series of potential improvements that go into Madison.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
That, yeah.
All right.
And I'll be honest with you, I completely missed the repeals, the MCORS, the first time I read it. It's kind of just tucked in there, but it does repeal the actual MCORS.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for now.
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greg, I appreciate your time yesterday. We talked through Senate Bill 100 a good bit. It is not a full repeal, as we've seen in some of the other bills, but it is, I'm hesitating to say this, it is a bit confusing. There's a whole lot packed in there. So I think, it doesn't have a House companion yet. We need to kind of see some of the details that might come out of the discussion and as it moves through session. But it does address some of the most critical concerns that at least I and others have been voicing. I've been voicing here as we've been talking about not impacting FDOT's budget, kind of moving future planning into the 5-year work plan, looking at some environmental concerns, other things like that. But again, I think there's more to unpack with that. We do have, you probably got an email, I think we all got it today, with some draft resolution language. And in talking with our director, and I believe you've had some other conversations, that language isn't on our agenda for today, but as Greg reminded me, we could take action in an executive committee in the coming weeks before our next board meeting if we get a House companion and if we have a desire to make any kind of statement about MCORs. So for my part, I would like to hear from the rest of you. I mean, I know that there's a lot packed into that resolution language. If you even had time to talk or to look at it today, it came in mid-morning. But things are moving quickly. We don't have time, I don't believe, for another MPOAC meeting or another CRTPA meeting. So I think particularly if we get a companion and we are focused on preserving the FDOT budget, making sure that any future work goes into the 5-year work plan so it's in competition, as it were, and moves through the appropriate process with FDOT, that would address one big concern. And secondly, just given the state budget and other things, we need to see some of the, from my perspective, the timeline, the budget allocation, other things repealed. I think that is very significant. And the last thing I would just say here, Mr. Chair, is we all know that resolutions every once in a while have an impact on our legislature. Most of the time they don't, but there have been those instances where resolutions, particularly from multiple counties or multiple jurisdictions around the state, will have an impact. And I think it would be important if we as a group want to make a statement about those budget issues, things like that, to kind of have that placeholder of the executive committee to review some language and pass a resolution or some statement in the near future. So I know that's a lot. I'll save it, I'd like to hear the rest of the discussion, but that's kind of where I am right now. I think we need to have that placeholder. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll just weigh in for a second. First off, thanks Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Barfield. I know you've been intimately involved in this project and have really taken the lead. Personally, I would entertain taking action. I've been opposed to the MCORs, if that's the will of this body, to flesh that out today of what position we want to take. I'm happy to have that conversation and would love to hear everybody else's opinion. Back to you, Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Dozier, Commissioner Barfield, I'm really glad that you two are involved in the task force. I think your perspective is very valuable when it comes to helping us determine what CRTPA should do. I've had conversations with Greg numerous times, as well as constituents. I'm sure you probably have had similar conversations and emails coming from folks that have shared concerns about MCORs. And my main concern centers around the Suncoast Connector, of course, which is our general area. Since the beginning, I've been opposed to the idea of forging ahead, as the statutes require FDOT to do, without doing a comprehensive needs assessment and an economic feasibility analysis. Given the level of service that 19 is currently experiencing, there's not really, at least at this point, it doesn't appear to be sufficient demand for a whole new road. If anything, again, without doing the needs assessment, without doing the economic feasibility analysis, it appears that an upgrade of 19, if anything, would be the right step to take. with taxpayer dollars. So I support what Commissioner Dozier has said. I'm not, in conversations with Greg and getting feedback from him, I'm personally of the opinion, maybe a letter written to the legislature, the committee chairs, Speaker of the House, et cetera, stating that we believe a needs assessment and an economic feasibility study is required per normal standard operating procedure before it moves forward with MCORs. I think that might be the best approach from my perspective, but definitely I'd like to hear more from the rest of the people on the board here and from Commissioners Dozier and Barfield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. Any further comment on this item?
Mr. Chair, I'm just curious if there's any opposition to doing any kind of letter or resolution. I mean, right now, it's just Commissioner Minor and myself and, well, and the chairman mentioning this, but I'm just curious if there's opposition or other things, because we wouldn't want to move to an exec committee. I mean, we would need a vote to do that probably. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Commissioner Barfield?
Thank you. As everyone here probably knows, Jefferson County did vote for a no build and sent that up to the governor and the speaker and the Senate president, and certainly made an impact on it because everybody's using that to move it forward. And as Jefferson County's representative, I have to continue with the no build because that is what my county asked me to do. That's why I'm serving on this. To your point, Commissioner Minor, I know that before anything is done, they will do the economic impact study. They'll do the study of the services. They'll do the needs study, the economic, the environment. All of that will be done. And that is normal, but you're right. The way that they are doing it is backwards to what we normally do, and there is some concern about taking money out of the work program. So if the board wants to move forward with doing a resolution, allowing the executive committee to go ahead and pull together the resolution, the letter, and move that forward, I would support that because that's what my county has asked for. I hesitated about voting no build because I believe that there's benefits that we could have in the future in Jefferson County, whether that's built or not. But that was the will of the board, and I voted with them because that's what my constituents wanted, and that's the way it goes. So I don't think today voting on it would be appropriate. I don't think that is, I haven't seen it, so I don't, and as far as the public goes, I would hope that they would want to see it before we took any action on it. So I'd be comfortable with taking it to the executive committee.
Commissioner Maddox?
On point, Commissioner Barfield, was it a unanimous?
I can't understand you, sir.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Was it unanimous?
No.
What was the
I
question?
think I asked, was it unanimous?
Unanimous.
Mr. Chair, I think we can pretty well assume that if we take a vote here today to talk about whether or not we want to allow the executive committee to make a decision, that the executive committee was made up of yourself and who else is on it?
Mr. Dozier, Mr. Merritt.
Yeah, I could pretty well assume that, given the conversation, that it's probably going to pass through executive committee and go. So a confirmative vote to send it to the executive committee pretty much says we're sending it. We're going to do this and move forward and send it to the legislature. I guess I say that. I say all that to say no need being run push on it. I mean, either we going to send it or we're not going to send it. As for our vote today, I don't really have a huge problem with sending it, supporting Jefferson County, since Jefferson County is the county that's going to be majorly affected by it. But again, I just don't believe that we should send it to the executive committee when we know the executive committee then is going to send it to the legislature on our behalf. We're going to be in, let's all be in. Thank you.
I don't feel comfortable taking a vote today on
I
this
agree.
anyway. So Wakulla County has no dog in this fight whatsoever. I'll just go ahead and say that. Jefferson County is the one that has a dog in the fight. They've sent their letter in. I'd say leave it at that.
Thank you, Commissioner Merritt. Yeah, I mean, I would add that if we went down this path, we would have to establish today what would be included in that resolution. I haven't read all the details of the resolution that was sent to us, but is it blanket opposition? Is it supporting certain legislation that's proposed here? I agree with Commissioner Maddox that this may be the last and final opportunity, and if we vote today, that's what would move forward. So I think it would be helpful to know everybody's position, and if we move forward with a resolution, we come to an agreement, maybe not read the language today, but agree what that resolution would look like if it went to the executive committee. Commissioner Dozier.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner BBC.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item, as a matter of fact, is something that I was going to present for discussion today at my county commission meeting. Yes, we are looking at it. I don't think Gaston County really has a dog in the fight. But since one of our fellow county has, in the TPA, has large benefit on it, and I think that's something we need to consider. So right now, if the path we are to take right now is to say, yes, we should support this particular bill. It should be something that the executive committee should be working on, and then maybe just poll the counties and see if that's what we should follow through with it. But I cannot today actually intelligently vote one way or the other without my county commission itself really having a discussion and taking a position on it. I don't just want to arbitrarily go into voting for something that my commission does not really have a position on right now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Richardson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would be hesitant to take any kind of vote today. This item wasn't agended for today. I think I got the resolution sometime this morning. Maybe I hadn't even had a chance to look at it because I had some other issues to take care of this morning before I got here, but I saw it in the email box. So I would really be hesitant to, not hesitant, I would not want to take a vote on this item today. Expressing a position of this body on it, I certainly support Jefferson County. They certainly will be impacted, but they have made their position known, and it wasn't even a unanimous vote in Jefferson. I think there are probably some of the citizens there, Commissioner Barfield, that may even support it. But I don't know that we're in a position now, and if it's I don't want to call it a rubber stamp. If we send it to our executive committee, I wouldn't go that far. But I wouldn't feel comfortable with that being the position of this body without us having had some type of brisk discussion about it and understanding of what all the ramifications of our vote would be if we voted not to.
I agree.
So,
Commissioner Dozier, then Commissioner Minor.
Thank you. I wanted to jump back in there. Commissioner Minor, thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution, the draft language that we got is robust. It's multiple pages and very detailed. So I think and I have communicated this to the person who sent it to us, that we could not vote on it today per our own rules. MCORS was agended for the discussion, but not that particular resolution. So I agree with that. It may be easier, I mean, we're all familiar with the resolution language, a lot of whereases, it's kind of the statement of our belief. That may be a challenge to do just through the executive committee. So coming back to Commissioner Minor, your comment about sending a letter and what Jefferson County did, I would like to propose that we may be able to distill our perspective to something that is amenable to this group, that has been consistent throughout all of our conversations. One I'm sorry?
Today?
Yeah, I'm going to give you just a couple of bullets. One is that we appreciate FDOT's work, their typical approach, having projects flow through the 5-year work plan. And we would not have to say, this is Senate Bill 100 or Senate Bill 1030 necessarily. Those might shift. We don't have a House companion to Senate Bill 100 yet. So really just focus on repealing those portions of MCORS that have a designated construction schedule and budget in the next few years. That's because of COVID, but also it's just an aggressive timeline. We want to focus on FDOT's typical process, their 5-year work plan, as all of our other projects work through that. And I'm just going to toss in one last one, is that the work of in particularly our task force, I think all three, it produced a tremendous amount of data and GIS maps and other things about our region from Citrus County through Jefferson County. And that's significant. I mean, it could really support improving existing infrastructure in those communities along that corridor. And so just saying that we look for, using this work product to assess the needs of that corridor. I think if I'm reading between the lines there, Commissioner Barfield, I think that's really what our sense was in our discussion, our public sunshine discussions at the task force was, we know there are needs, we just need more time to study those needs.
Right.
So bringing this back, it's repeal the construction schedule and the budget allocation, move the decision about any any projects in any of these 3 areas into FDOT's typical work program, appreciating their work, and then use that data for the Suncoast region to assess future project needs as we go forward. That could be in a letter, not a resolution. That would be my pitch, Mr. Chair.
Again, I don't feel comfortable voting for anything.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Dozier, I think that's exactly the right approach. I think that's very smart. And by not referring to a bill, I think that makes the letter more pertinent, because you can have a strike-all amendment for any one of these bills that changes the whole content of what we're talking about. I think the provisions that you talked about in the letter are exactly what many citizens who have contacted us are mainly concerned about. Even if the northern terminus for Suncoast Connector is taken out of Jefferson County, if that were to happen, then technically the CRTPA would not have jurisdiction over the Suncoast Connector. But I look at it a different way, and in the respect that we're looking at an incredible amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars being spent before the proper needs analysis, before the proper economic feasibility study has been done. By putting the design up front, I just don't think it's a good use of taxpayer dollars. So, and that's always been my main concern. And so when Commissioner Dozier talks about this letter, about responsible use of taxpayer dollars and putting the horse before the cart, I think that's exactly the right approach. And from what Greg and I have talked about before, it does seem like maybe a letter is probably the best step at this point, as opposed to a resolution. So, Commissioner Dozier, if that's a motion of yours, I would second that. But maybe the best thing is to direct it to the executive committee for them to actually draft the letter as you described.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Minor, I didn't make it as a form of a motion. I was just suggesting it so we could have a little more dialogue. I wouldn't mind doing that, but if you don't mind, I'll hold off on that motion for a minute, just see if there's any other discussion. But we could have a motion that really narrowly focuses the letter, and then an exec committee would just be approving the final draft of that, as it were. So, thank you.
Commissioner Maddox, followed by Commissioner Barfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Barfield, did your county take a formal stance? I know it took a formal stance of no build, but did it come to this committee, to this board, for support of the?
Thank you.
Did Jefferson County come to this board for support of their no build?
Yes, we passed a no-build resolution, 4-1.
I understand, but did they ask for this board support of the no build?
Did they ask for what?
Our
For
board,
the
our
CRTPA
board,
support.
no build.
They did not ask that.
You know, the thing I found, and this is really the thing I find interesting is that Commissioner Barfield is the representative from Jefferson County. Did not bring up the idea of the resolution. And when asked about it, hesitantly spoke on behalf of her county for us to support a resolution. And what we're asking here today is that, not that we support the resolution that came, but just that the CRTPA has a resolution that says no bill. We got a bunch of commissioners here who aren't comfortable in making that decision as of right now. But then again, we're going to yield that decision to a executive committee that's more than likely going to vote in favor, even if one doesn't, of moving forward with a letter or a resolution. If Jefferson County feels strongly about it, and the representative from such feels strongly about it, I'll support it. But if she does not, I'm not. I mean, I'm not going to let, I can imagine sitting here, I know we represent the whole area, but I can imagine sitting here as Leon County and Jefferson, Gaston, or Wakulla is leading the way on a resolution for my county that I didn't ask for. Now, I know they did it. I know they did no bill, but at the same time, if I felt that strongly about it as a representative from Leon County, I'm sure I would. If I didn't, I'm sure Kristen would. If Commissioner Dozier didn't, I know Commissioner Minor would, and same thing for you, Mr. Chair. So I would feel more comfortable if I felt like this big push was coming from Jefferson County's own representative versus, our other counties pushing it. Now, we can quietly behind the scenes at some, say, okay, I think we all support whatever stances our counties take. But to have a full letter or resolution that's led by another county, it just doesn't seem right to me. But I understand where you're going with it. I mean, the things you're saying make sense. I just would have liked to seen more of a push from the county that's going to be most effective. And I'm not saying that Commissioner Barfield to say that you don't care either way, but I'm saying it to say that your board, I give a prime example. The last time we were here, I asked for this board to send a letter to the MPOAC illuminating our support of the 5-year building monies not being affected by MCORs. That way the MPOAC knows where this board stands. Now, if Jefferson County had done the same, then I would have been all in support and saying, let's move with this thing, whether I saw the resolution or not. But Jefferson County didn't take that step. They just said no bill. So I'm having a hard time getting to where we're trying to go here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
Happy under
Barfield?
that. Yes. So, Commissioner Dozier, I absolutely agree with what you have talked about. What I would say is that if this board could review that resolution, that letter, before it goes, y'all vote on it, I think that would be appropriate. And thank you, Commissioner Maddox, for your words right there. My goal was to create those guiding principles and to send it up and create a great relationship with all the people that were on the task force, Florida Department of Transportation, and if that's what my county wants is no build, then I have no choice but to support that. And thank you again for deferring to me and asking about that. But if we've sent the no build, we had some very, very strong language in there. I didn't agree with the language that they had in there, but I still had to vote on that no build. I believe that this board could write a letter exactly what we're talking about. Doesn't have to say no build. It could say what our concerns are, which is what we have been talking about all along. They already have the no build part. They already know that. And it's probably not even coming to Jefferson County at this point. So what I would say as a representative of Jefferson County, let's write a letter, resolution, let all of us look at it, take it to the executive committee, and vote your heart on what you think should be done. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Commissioner Merritt?
Well, I agree with what Nick said, and I agree with what Betsy just said, too. Again, if it comes up for a vote, I'm going to vote no, because this just came out of left field, okay? I don't have anything to look at to say, here's what we're voting on. Even though I'm on the executive committee, that's not fair to the other members on here.
Yeah, I agree. I can't vote today on a resolution.
No, I mean, Betsy needs to be able to see exactly what we're saying. Number one, to mirror what Nick says, they haven't even asked us to do anything, number one. This just came out of left field. I think we're getting involved in something we got no business getting involved with unless we're asked by our member county. If Wakulla County comes see our TPA and asks, hey, guys, we'd like you to support this or whatever, fine. They haven't done that. It's just, I mean, I'm frankly shocked this even came up today.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Slay, but I would say I think we've had several conversations around MCORs at this board. I think last year we had a Leon County Commissioner advocate for us not to take any action at that time until more information was included. I know I've been following this piece of legislation and the pieces as they move, so I think there's information out there. I hear your points, Commissioner Mayor, Commissioner Barfield. I'm happy to support the letter. It seems like nobody is willing to support a resolution, but to me, what's important is if the pieces that Commissioner Barfield are okay with being included and what she's not okay with being included is the final product, then I'm okay with it. I want us all, I don't want this to be a split vote on what should be in it and what shouldn't be in it, but if we can all get to a consensus on what should be in a letter, I think we should move forward. We're in a unique position because of the timing of the state legislature. We can't ask them to slow down. We can't ask them to move. At the City of Tallahassee, we've been in that position before where we've had to take votes that didn't have probably the right public notification just because of something like an auction coming up or that sort of thing that was time sensitive. And I think this is time sensitive, which is why I think we only meet so often, and that's what the urgency was brought about. Mr. Slay?
I just wanted to point out, going back to some of the questions on the resolution that was submitted, there's basically 2 points to it. It calls for the governor and the legislature to immediately cease funding for MCORs, and then also supports legislation that would repeal the MCORs statute, I guess, as it exists. I'm kind of paraphrasing. The only other thing I wanted to point out, there are several whereases in the resolution that I have concerns about. So, you know, if we were to do something, we'd probably want to draft our own version of it. But just, I wanted to touch quickly on what this particular resolution that was submitted to you all, in essence, says.
Thank you, Mr. Slay. And I think the conversation at this point is just based on maybe what Commissioner Dozier was suggesting would be included in a letter. But I want to go to you, Commissioner Richardson, and then Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me ask this question first. Commissioner Barfield, did you say that it's a good likelihood that MCORs will not, based on discussions that's being had, come through Jefferson County?
Well, since we did the no build, I seriously doubt it's coming to Jefferson County, since we did a no build resolution.
Okay.
Supported 4-1.
Yeah.
And I voted for a no build.
Right.
I wasn't the one
Right.
that said no on that.
Commissioner, if I could.
So I guess, I think that then in that likelihood that it's not going to even impact one of our member counties, why do we want to weigh in at this point? And what will that do? What would a letter to the legislature do at this point? I mean, this thing it's so far down the railroad tracks. I don't think a letter from this group that we haven't seen, and even to review the letter before it's approved by the executive committee, I don't feel comfortable with it. Because we haven't had an opportunity for public input. I don't know how we could do that without some opportunity for the public to weigh in. So, I mean, I just don't feel comfortable with this fast track of even a letter when there's a likelihood that even one of our member counties will not be impacted by this.
May I address that, Chair?
Commissioner Barfield.
Yes, so I agree. I think if, in my mind's eye, if this board is going to take a position, it should be on the policy side of the position. We've already taken our position of no vote, no build. And there are many other issues, as we all know, that is associated with this particular toll road. And it's not just ours from Levy County to Jefferson County, it's all of them. So if we're going to take a position, I would say that the position is, as Commissioner Dozier mentioned, if this board wants to move forward with this, and I'm good with moving forward with it. I'm good with stating our position here, because we are a member of Jefferson County. I would say that we have an emergency meeting, let the public say their piece, advertise it. We can certainly, that is certainly well within our right, and everybody weigh in on it. And that way we can move it forward in good conscience.
Commissioner Dozier?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
If it's that
Thank you, Mr.
important, let's have an emergency meeting.
If it's that important, yes. I agree with
It's
that.
not that important, but anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I did make a note a moment ago about whether or not we could have an emergency meeting, meet quorum with Leon and Tallahassee members, and take a vote to have other members join us virtually. We've done that with some others. We need a quorum in the room, and I would be hard-pressed to ask anyone to drive to Tallahassee for a one-issue meeting, but, I mean,
I'd
that...
do it.
You do it, okay, so...
It's only 30 minutes away.
Okay, so, so that is an option, and frankly, that would make me more comfortable if it was a full board vote. The reason why we don't have language, from my perspective, this has come up 3 or 4 times in different meetings and been agended. I mean, this wasn't out of the blue. It was on the agenda today, just not the language for the resolution, right? But it was on the agenda because we anticipated that bills might be filed since our last CRTPA meeting. So this was the very first time that we could even discuss whether or not we like one of the bills or we wanted to make a statement. Every time this has been brought up, we want to hear what Jefferson says, and we want to see what the legislature is doing. I respectfully have to disagree with not having a dog in this fight right now, because for those 3 bullets, I'm not talking about any particular route. That's the Jefferson-Madison question, and Madison County really wants it. We heard that even during the task force. I would argue that any MPO like ours, anywhere in the state, or any rural county that's not a member of an MPO, could have a stake in this because it so dramatically impacts the state budget. And it could impact other projects on our funding list. So again, going back to those bullets, that's why I was trying to refine it to say the MCOR's repeal. The repeal part of that is important because that is the construction schedule. That is the funding dedicated over the next few years. It doesn't speak to the other 2 proposed routes. It doesn't get into those details. It is simply saying, we don't need to lock in this budget and this construction schedule for the benefit of the entire state, whether you're touched by one of these corridors or not. And we would like to see any projects run through FDOT's typical program, whom we very much like, waving to DOT, and appreciate their approach. They did a lot of work on these task force, and using the data that came from the Suncoast Task Force could help our region. Again, that is why I narrowed it to those 3 bullets, because it is the policy issues that we have talked about at every single meeting. And I'm wondering if there's an emergency meeting, or if we distilled those 3 bullets and we found an agreement on that, we could draft the letter, but we do need to see that language.
Everything, Kristen, everything you said, I agree with.
Commissioner Merritt, let's hold the floor. I got Commissioner Villavisi next, and
Go on,
followed by
Commissioner
Commissioner
Merritt, I yield to him, let him finish.
I agree with what you said. I want to see what I'm voting on.
Yeah.
I want to see a piece of paper saying, here's what you're voting yes or no on, not, here's our ideas we want to present, here's this, here's that. Show me the piece, show me what we're voting on, and I'll vote, but I'm not voting on something today.
I was simply saying that, forgive me, Mr. Chair, that we could, but I would prefer to have exec or an emergency meeting if there is a desire to do that. The case I'm making is this is pertinent, in my opinion, and I think a lot of folks around, to every taxpayer in Florida, to every MPO, whether they're inside the corridors or not.
Not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
Not saying you're wrong.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so it seems to be somewhat of a consensus on 3 things to discuss, and definitely we would need an emergency meeting, and everybody have an opportunity to vote on it. It seems to be the frame of where we're at now. Commissioner Maddox?
I was going to make the motion for the emergency meeting.
Commissioner Slay?
Well,
A second.
well, I was, got a motion in a second now, but I wanted to ask
I
a
seconded.
question.
So we have a motion on the table for an emergency meeting by Commissioner Maddox, seconded by Commissioner Merritt. I'll go to Greg Slay, but then I think what we would need, what would be included in the emergency meeting.
Right, that's
Greg Slay.
What was that last sentence?
What will be included in the emergency meeting?
what we'll
I guess that's kind of my question now, is we've kind of shifted from, if I'm understanding you all correctly, making position statements on MCORs in general, not necessarily reacting to any legislation that's currently in session.
Correct.
So, I mean, I tend to think we could do that if you want to go down that path without an emergency meeting, if you just provide some direction as to what you want in the letter in general. I could draft a letter. I mean, we probably going to send it sooner than later, but I think we've kind of deviated from reacting to current legislation to going back and making some statements on MCORs in general. Does that make sense?
I'm fine with that, too, if we don't have to vote on something.
Well, that's,
My issue is voting.
Okay.
something I haven't seen.
well,
Commissioner Dozier?
if I could clarify, sorry. did I-
Is it we're writing a letter or we're sending a resolution? Which is stronger?
Mr. Slay?
It means we voted on it.
Commissioner Dozier, your arguments were based off of the funding piece, right? I mean, I'm sorry, your arguments were based off the funding piece, which we had already talked about. Remember last meeting, we talked about we're going to send a letter to MPOAC because of funding. So is there any difference between that piece and what you're talking about here today? It's just this legislation further exemplifies why we need to be concerned more about the funding piece. Is there any difference between the two?
So I had mentioned the letter, thinking that we might be able to expedite that, and the whereas clauses, it's really, I think that takes a lot more work and direction to staff about what we want to see in those whereas clauses. So I was looking for something that was more, that we could wrap our arms around more quickly. A letter, again, it may or may not impact session, but the sooner rather than later is good, and I think there's a lot of voices coming into this discussion right now. So to your point, Commissioner Maddox, I think that's a really excellent point on the letter we already approved to MPOAC, because yes, that's a big piece of it. We've already had a vote on not impacting FDOT budget. And as it regards any particular bills, I would say we don't highlight any bill number, 100, 1030, nothing like that, but say that we would support legislation that removes the construction schedule and dedicated funding in effort to put this back in DOT's hands to do the analysis and needs assessment going forward in their 5-year work plan. So yes, it does what we contemplated in the MPOAC letter, which is if we do those first two pieces, repeal the construction schedule and the funding, put it back in FDOT's hand, then we believe it won't impact our MPO's projects or others.
Stretching a little far, in my, no offense, but when you add in the language about, we want you to put it back in the DOT funding, we want to do a needs analysis and all that stuff, I don't want to get that specific on it without looking at exactly what we're going to say. If we're going to get Greg to write a letter, I agree with your points about not affecting funding. That does affect Will Cole, you're correct about that. Generic points like that, especially if we don't have to vote on it. We can just give Greg, yeah, I'll be fine with a letter like that. If we don't have to vote on it, that takes everything, that relieves all my concerns. If we're not doing a resolution, we don't need to vote. If we can just give
We need
Greg
a vote
direction.
for direction today.
And let Greg send it to everybody before he sends it to whoever he's going to send, and say, anybody got any problem with this?
Currently, we have a motion on the table for the emergency meeting.
I'll rescind my motion. Quite frankly, I think we could achieve what we're trying to achieve by just asking Greg to send the same letter we send to MPOAC.
I agree.
I agree.
I mean, we already approved that letter. We just take the same letter to send to legislation.
I agree.
And
Mr. Chairman, on point.
Commissioner Minor?
I just spoke with our counsel, Mr. Williams, about Sunshine Law, and so we would not be, in order to comply with Sunshine Law, we could not be sent the draft of the letter and approve it individually outside of a public meeting.
Gotcha.
Again, we've already approved the letter. Just take the letter that we've already written.
Right, we would have to give direction today, what would be included in the letter.
Yes.
Or defer that responsibility to the executive.
Or mirror the letter we've already sent.
Commissioner Dozier?
Question for clarification. for Commissioner Maddox or Greg, the letter to the MPOAC simply talked about impacts to our projects within the 5-year work plan. It didn't reference, if my memory serves, the fact that the legislation as it exists today would likely impact our budget. I mean, the repeal piece, I think that's what I heard you say, Commissioner Merritt, that you were concerned about. We can't say don't impact our budget without saying we need to repeal what was MCORS.
We need to have emergency.
So I will say that the Senate Bill 100, it does repeal, I think this was what Commissioner Minor was looking for some clarification, the construction schedule and other parts, the MCOR bill, but there's a whole lot of other things in there that says, and we will fund this, and we will do this, and I mean, it has a lot of elements of MCORs within that bill that would continue, but it repeals that core, to the best of my understanding, having read it through twice, and it's still a little confusing, that it repeals that core concern that it's locked into an aggressive construction and funding schedule that could harm the state budget.
Commissioner Barfield.
Mr. Slay, what do you think we should do? Resolution or letter? You're the expert.
Oh, look at the
Director
move
Slay.
adjournment, Mr. Chairman.
Nobody here is going to support a resolution. I mean,
No.
Nobody's going to do it. We can do an emergency meeting. Everybody's
We're
okay
only
with a
talking
letter.
about
That's why I asked him. We can do an
I-
emergency meeting, or we could do a letter. I'm asking him what his.
Mr. Slay.
I think at this point, a letter works better. I don't know that we need to go through having an emergency, or technically, we'd probably do a special meeting if we needed to. But, you know,
As long
if
as
you
the
all can
language
give me
here is
some,
what we've already sent.
clear direction as to what highlight, or what points you want to hit in the letter. You know, the first one being, of course, the impact, as I phrase it in the letter, to the current work program. And I referenced the issue we had, as we talked about last month, with Capital Circle Southwest falling out of the work program, not because of MCORs, but just the general financial situation that DOT is in now with COVID. So if you all want to hit on a couple of 3 points, I think the letter would be the best way to go at this point.
Okay. Well, let's do this. I think 3 points have been brought up. Commissioner Barfield, it seemed like that wasn't an objection from Jefferson County. If we want to give Director Slay the criteria of the letter, let's do that, and let's take a vote on it, and then let's move on.
We have to vote on it, or just consensus?
I'm good with everything except for the repeal piece. Commissioner Dozier, your piece that
Commissioner-
you talked about before, not impacting the budget, I think the repeal is what probably took it over the edge for Commissioner Merritt, and I'm kind of there too. If we could just cut it off right there when we talk about appeal, I'm cool.
Why don't we just mirror the
Commissioner
same
Dozier.
letter we sent to whoever?
Commissioner Dozier.
I feel so strongly about this that if the best we could do today is get the same letter we got to MPOAC, we could get there. But if I'm going to be making the motion, and let me be clear, again, if we mention repeal of the existing MCORS legislation, we don't have to even say perhaps repeal, but we have concerns about the aggressive construction schedule and the funding that is in current statute. And we would support legislation to remove those timelines and other things. It may, that language right there could support Senate Bill 100.
Just more color, but I'm not going to vote for it.
That's fine. We don't have, we can
Well,
disagree sometimes.
We'll get to the
But-
votes, Commissioner.
Yeah. But I think that's why I'm struggling with the word repeal, is that this is the language, even in 100, it repeals some portions and adds back others. So however we want to say that, and I hear you, Mr. Chair, I want to bring this in for a landing too, and I think getting it done today is good. But saying that we would support legislation that repeals or removes the timeline and the dedicated funding as it currently exists in statute, and support FDOT assessing the needs in these types of projects for Suncoast Parkway Extension for that area in their typical 5-year work plan, relying on the data from the task force to inform that and future work, something like that. that I just don't know how we get out of saying we don't want that funding that's in the existing statute.
Okay, I'm good with that. And I would also add into our letter that we would like to see the work of the guiding principles become a document in which guides the improvements, the new roads that are to be built.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind,
Commissioner.
utilizing the task force report for the Suncoast Corridor and the guiding principles to assess any future infrastructure improvements for that corridor through FDOT's typical process, needs assessment, et cetera, environmental impacts, all of that. Director Slade, is this clear as mud, or are we honing in on something here?
Well, let's see, I've got impact current projects, remove the current funding and timeline, and then using the guiding principles established by the Suncoast Task Force.
To guide future infrastructure improvements
Yes.
for this corridor
Yes.
through FDOT's typical.
Do we want to say anything about the needs improvement, economic assessment, and levels of services, that those are concerns also? Just as, not in bullet points, but as part of a paragraph that, as your intro.
They're still in the original MCOR's legislation. There's language that talks about, I can't remember off the top of my head, but DOT's process, so to speak. So I think those pieces happen either way. So I think we're covered by the statute there, but if you want to add it in there, we could always do
I'm
it.
not understanding what you're saying.
Sorry.
Could you repeat that, please?
If I can't, they probably can't.
I think that the general DOT process is still in the original MCOR's language. The bigger issue with that is the timeframes that were established don't fit how long that process normally takes.
Okay.
And I think that maybe was Commissioner Dozier's concern on the aggressive timeline. But I think the overall, the financial review is still a requirement. I mean, they can't get past that state law for toll facilities. That's even, I believe, referenced in Senate Bill 100 as well.
Okay. All right. Just as our board, we are policymakers, and that's what we are doing. We have sent up the no build, and we have sent up some very strong language with that no build from Jefferson County on a 4-1 vote. So I believe that we've done our part, and this part will be the policy side of it and how we see this being built out. And I don't believe that it is our choice to dictate what Citrus and Levy County does, because they have the congestion down there that we don't have up here. So I'm comfortable where we're going with it.
Mr. Chair, you want a motion?
Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you. And the policy direction, Commissioner Barfield, you keep coming back to that, and I think that's critical, that we're not doing the same as Jefferson County and no build. That's where we don't have a dog in the fight, because we're not on the Jefferson County Commission. So I'll make a motion to draft a letter on behalf of the CRTPA board to be sent to the relevant committees, House and Senate, and Greg, you already had this in your list, so I'm going to do shorthand, that we would support legislation removing the timeline and the set funding schedule, support work within the FDOT's typical process and 5-year work plan to assess the needs of the Suncoast Parkway corridor, and to rely on the guiding principles of the task force and the data and other work related to inform those decisions going forward to improve infrastructure, economic development, et cetera, in this corridor.
Needs level service. Yeah.
Needs level service. That would be my motion.
That's a huge motion. Did
I
you
know.
get that, Yolanda?
We got a
I'll
motion
second
on,
that.
She's
I'll second
recording,
that.
she says. That's good.
we got a motion on the table by Commissioner Dozier, seconded by Commissioner Barfield, to issue a letter with the 3 points as stated by Commissioner Dozier. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
I would suggest we do a
A roll call?
vote.
Okay, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Commissioner Barfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Merritt,
No.
Commissioner Villavisia?
Nay.
Commissioner Dozier?
Yes.
Commissioner Maddox? Commissioner Minor?
Yes.
Commissioner Matlow?
Yes?
Commissioner Richardson?
No.
And that is everybody.
That was 4-4.
Looks like we're 4-4.
Jack's running the calculation.
Okay.
Wait.
Now we gotta wait a bit.
Shouldn't be waiting.
I outweighted you.
Oh,
Cancel
it's
each other's
weighted
vote.
vote. Oh, my God.
No, we are still working that through all of our member governments.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was going to ask about that.
No offense.
I don't believe it. but
Okay.
No,
Jack's running the numbers, so.
Is it because you want it to
I
go?
want to see what
Mr.
vote-
Chair,
That's it.
Yeah.
Procedure.
Commissioner Dozier?
you want to see it first?
Yes.
Okay.
See it before I vote on
We're
it.
going to make a
Just that
motion.
simple.
That was quite a motion, as you said, Commissioner Barfield. We're drafting by committee, by board, and that was a good discussion, but I guess I was curious if those of you who voted against it would have voted for it if we were coming back to see a draft, or we didn't need to spend this much time drafting it. I thought we were kind of getting towards consensus. So is the desire to have a special meeting, or should we just end this and be done with
I
it?
think we can get to
I'd
consensus.
just
I
let it
think
go.
that was just, I think.
Passes, it passes, if it don't, let it go. It's up to y'all.
So no, the motion did not pass.
The motion
pass.
fails on
It passed.
4-4.
Oh, it did pass? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Well, there you go. We don't have to have a special meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
So-
sorry. It
Okay.
did pass.
The motion
cannot-
passes
We
4-4.
we cannot see this letter before it goes out, right? Is that what, that's crazy.
No, it
I mean,
passes.
we've
You
already
still see
voted on it.
I think you'd be able to send a letter before it goes out. We just want to be able to take action on it behind. We want to be able to divert action to a different direction without having
I
an
don't want to get in
emergency
trouble.
board
Don't
meeting.
even send it to me.
No, I mean, typically I would copy you all on something that goes out anyway, but I can send it just so everybody sees it.
Yep.
Once it's sent already, so we can't
Yeah.
say,
That's-
change this.
Okay, well, the motion carried. Let's move on. We're going on to 8, Florida Department of Transportation report.
That was interesting.
Mr. Chair, real quick, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, just 1 minute. I might have to leave. I have a 4 o'clock meeting in Gaston County, so I might have to ease on out.
I have to leave also, I'm sorry.
That does not affect quorum.
Okay, thank you, sir.
No offense. Not just because you got up there, I really need to go. Good vote,
Well,
discussion.
No offense to you, sir.
I was going to say, initially,
commitment.
I only had 2 brief items, but I felt the need, we probably need to discuss the MCORs a little bit more before I get into my issues.
I'm not going anywhere, so.
No, seriously, two quick issues, some follow-ups from previous meetings, especially with Commissioner Villavite. The County Road 65 out of Pulgas Highway project, we did receive the county's request to add paved shoulders to that scope of work. Subsequent to the last CRTPA meeting, we have submitted the supplemental agreement back to the county. So as soon as that gets executed, we'll be able to include that in the project.
And then, Mr. Chair, if you real quick, thank you very much. As a matter of fact, the approval of that award is on our agenda today, so I was going to actually spend some time. Thank you for your expeditious response to our request.
Okay.
Thank you,
You're
sir.
The other issue is we recently went through the TMA certification for the CRTPA. I'm sure Greg's going to mention this, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I did want to indicate from the Florida DOT's perspective, your staff did an excellent job addressing Federal Highways concerns. They addressed most of the issues in advance based on a desk review that the Federal Highway Administration completed. That made the actual certification meetings very painless in comparison to the way they've done in the past. But just like any audit, I'm sure they'll find something to complain about, but we just want to let you know from DOT's perspective that staff and the CRTPA are doing an excellent job.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate your hard work. Going on to 9, the Executive Director's report.
Just very quickly, actually, Bryant touched on the main thing. We did have our certification meeting in late February. And as Bryant said, I would anticipate some type of corrective actions. I'm guessing probably in our performance measures, perhaps, looking at some of the ones they've done around the state, possibly one or two on the long-range plan, but by and large, I think we came through the certification extremely well.
Okay,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
absolutely. Any conversation on the information items, future meetings, or project updates? Item 11, items from CRTPA board meetings, members? Okay, that completes the meeting. Motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second. We're done.